You know, long before 2012, when Jet Set Radio was released on just about every single platform possibly imaginable, there were only two ways to play it. You either did the normal thing and played it on the Dreamcast, or you were dumb like the 10-year-old me was and bought it on the Game Boy Advance. Welcome to Port Patrol, the show where I look at weird, interesting, or knockoff ports of video games, and today we are taking a look at Jet Set Radio on the Game Boy Advance. And now it's time for the inevitable but probably not necessary portion of the video where I describe what Jet Set Radio is, even though most people watching this already know. Jet Set Radio is the greatest game that Sega has ever made, as long as you ignore the fact that Jet Set Radio Future is better. Everything about this series, can two games even be called a series, is absolutely perfect in my opinion. Apart from the gameplay. That can be a little rough in some places. But the music, the graphics, the music, and can't forget the graphics, are so beautifully stylish that you can't help but forgive these shortcomings because of what an absolute joy they are to play. Now of course, the logical thing to do with a game which is most well known for its incredible soundtrack and beautiful visuals is to port it to a game system that can't really handle either of them.
Well, at least they tried.
Sega enlisting the help of Vicarious Visions, who were well known at the time for their impressive GBA conversions of the Tony Hawk's games. They probably couldn't have picked a better team for the job, and their hard work is very apparent in just how accurate this game is to the original. All the locations are more or less exactly the same, give or take some small alterations to take the isometric display into account, and it plays pretty much identically too. In fact, they nailed the feel of the original so well that I could practically use my muscle memory from the Dreamcast game to navigate this one. I cannot stress what a good job they did controls-wise. I honestly can't complain. I mean, I'm still going to, but I'm just saying, I really don't have a right to complain, but yeah, don't know where I'm going with that. Just cut this bit.
Let's get scratching.
They may have done an incredible job, but there are some areas where the isometric display really becomes a hindrance. In fact, it is legit the only major complaint I have, apart from all the other ones. Sometimes things are just completely obscured from your view, like here where the only reason I knew where to grind was because I had played the original, and sometimes the perspective just feels completely off. It's hard to get a good gauge of height when everything is flat, which led to me failing to make jumps more times than I could possibly count. Which is especially frustrating when numerous challenges in the game force you to jump on rails or platforms that are off-screen. But these are small instances of annoyance in an otherwise pretty great conversion, at least in terms of how the game feels to play.
Emergency wit service.
What about content then? Did they have to cut anything out to make it fit on a GBA? What made it in and what didn't? Well, all the missions, apart from one, made it in, even if they don't necessarily take place on the same levels. Some of the more confusing level layouts from the original, such as Ben 10 Tower and this part of Grind City, were removed and had small parts of them combined into other levels. Annoyingly, this does mean that in Chapter 2, both of the levels take place on the same map, which makes it pretty boring, but aside from that, most of the game made it across. Sacrifices obviously had to be made, and unfortunately most of these sacrifices had to be made in the audio department. Characters only have one voice line each now, so I really hope you enjoy listening to the normal jingle that plays when you finish some graffiti has also been cut and replaced with
Jet Set Radio! Jet Set Radio! Jet Set Radio! Jet Set Radio!
which gets really annoying, especially because it's been pitch shifted down for whatever reason, so it sounds wrong every single time. And if you can guess what voice line Professor K gets when you get to play as him, I will personally go to your house and not give you anything because it should be pretty obvious. But, and this might be the saddest thing to ever happen in the history of the entire human race, the soundtrack has also been significantly shortened. There's only 6 music tracks in this game, and while that is to be expected, I really wish they could have been longer than 30-second loops, because it gets a little bit grating, it does. There's also a really annoying crowd cheering sound at the start of one song that just doesn't stop. It's still going now. It's like a 5-second crowd cheering loop that goes on for half the song. It's still going.
1, 2, 3.
But that was too soft.
Perhaps unexpectedly then, Jet Set Radio on the Game Boy Advance manages to be quite fun to play, at least for the first half, because in my opinion, the game really drops the ball once you reach the final chapter. It just doesn't do it justice. It doesn't go to the same lengths as the original did to make the Golden Rhinos truly appear as a psychotic and mad organisation that literally deploy car bombs and assassins to stop you from tagging your graffiti. The car bombs and the crazy dialogue is completely absent, but more annoyingly, they are almost completely useless now. They were ruthless in the original. They had like shock troopers, flamethrowers, and even people in jetpacks all trying to stop you, and they were a real obstacle that you had to take into account. In the GBA version, they just stand there and barely do anything. I managed to finish 2 of the 3 levels in this chapter while taking no damage, and these are supposed to be the hardest in the game, and they were incredibly challenging in the original. The AI were equally as useless in the starting stages, but those levels were supposed to be easy, and it didn't really occur to me how useless the enemies in this game were until I went back to get footage for this video. So how do they make the last levels challenging then? They give you less time. 400 seconds less time, if you want to be exact, which was nice of them. Which means that even when I knew exactly where I needed to go, and I didn't mess up at all through the level, I finished it with literally 0 seconds to spare, which apparently was still good enough to get the top rating for the level. I mean, I don't think I could have done any worse. I literally had 0 seconds, but I mean, I'll take it. It is a ridiculous time limit, which makes these last levels more frustrating than they are a challenge, because now it just comes down to remembering where to go, rather than having any real obstacles to overcome. But just because the last portion of the game can be a bit frustrating to finish, it doesn't change the fact that, at its core, the main gameplay can still be quite fun. Vicarious Visions absolutely nailed the feel of Jet Set Radio here, and while I do have my gripes of the game, that doesn't stop me from recommending it to any fans of Jet Set Radio out there. It's just interesting to see how they managed to convert it all, and there is something charming about seeing all these levels from an isometric viewpoint. If you haven't played Jet Set Radio before, then you're probably going to struggle with it, but to be honest, if you haven't played Jet Set Radio yet, then what the hell is wrong with you?